In this story, the protagonist, Aki, was the first son born to a noble, who was a disappointment to his family because his only power was the worthless ability to eat any plant. For this reason, his father kicked him out of the house, and his brothers, who had better skills, wished he'd die in the wasteland. However, Aki was beyond thrilled to leave his home because he had actually been reincarnated into the body of the Viscount's son, who was forced to train so hard so no one would discover his lack of talent. Now that he had finally gained freedom, Aki was eager to venture into the wilderness, but it wasn't as chill as he had hoped it would be, and he was only lucky that no monsters had attacked him yet. On the plus side, the skill that granted him the ability to eat any plant helped greatly in his survival, and his mana increased for every Mary Jane he consumed. One day, he heard a sound in the bushes and worried that it might be a monster, only to find a girl standing alone, looking lost. Out of his concern for her, Aki walked towards her, but she transformed into a hungry monster plant eager to gobble up his sausage. As Aki ran for his life, he realized that she was a plant and that he could consume all sorts of plants, so he started eating her up. High amounts of energy surged through him, and in no time he acquired a new skill. With this newfound strength, Aki was about to end her once and for all, but she begged him not to and said there was a demi-human inside her whom she hadn't finished consuming. He told her to let go of the demi-human, and she coughed up an elf whom she had been unable to digest due to the elf's overwhelming mana. Afterwards, the plant monster introduced herself as Rin, and Aki took the elf to his tent, where she regained consciousness. On the other hand, at Aki's household, his father and brothers gossiped about him, speculating that he had most likely been eaten up by a monster. The father said something about elves in the forest, and his sons asked him whether that had anything to do with their brother. However, he shared that their family could benefit from the presence of elves due to the diplomatic relationships they could establish. However, elves hadn't appeared in over 100 years, and the last human who connected the elves with the kingdom was still regarded as a hero, even 300 years later. This was because elves possessed magical technology and artifacts far superior to those of humans. However, elves were such special beings who only appeared in the history books once every few hundred years, and Aki's father only wanted the opportunity to meet with elves so their family's status would increase. On the other hand, Aki asked the elf some questions, but she was unresponsive until he said that she wanted to meet with the elves. Finally, she spoke up, saying that he had saved her a second time, and she had been searching for him for so long because she now had the chance to fulfill a promise she made 300 years ago. Aki didn't understand a word she said, but he certainly understood those golden apples when she flashed them. The elf passed out due to embarrassment, while Rin tagged along because she thought Aki was cool. Soon enough, the elf regained consciousness and apologized for causing trouble, but Aki told her that it was Rin's fault and gave her his clothes. However, Rin threw a gown to the elf, which turned out to be the elf's clothes that she failed to digest. Aki asked Rin if she had pulled the clothes out of her stomach, but she said that it was from her magic storage. He was impressed because the magic storage was a pretty high-level spell, but when he praised her, she went nuts with excitement. Anyway, he considered the probability that if it was magic that Rin could use, the magic storage box was also something that Rin could use, and Aki had eaten Rin, which meant he could also access the magic storage box. Just as he thought, he got access to a space when he reached his hand out for it. They were later joined by the elf, who finally introduced herself as Salas and thanked Aki for saving her. Staring into her eyes, Aki had to protect himself against her lethal face card, while Rin admitted that she never knew Salas was an elf but rather a monster or spirit. Salas explained to Aki, saying that the relationship between elves and spirits was a give and take, where elves borrowed power from spirits for their magic, and in return, the elves protected and nurtured those spirits. Considering Rin failed to digest the elf, Salas explained that no matter how strong the spirit was, it would necrotize before fully digesting an elf. Aki remembered that he had once heard carnivorous plants died if they were fed too many nutrients, so that meant elves really did possess an incredible amount of magical power. Salas added she knew she wouldn't have escaped unharmed, and so she was grateful to Aki for stepping in to help her. However, he told her not to worry and said he was just glad she was okay. Following that, Salas invited him to the elf village, and this sparked some curiosity in him because he had only ever heard about elves in history books and found it surprising that they even existed. He told Salas that his clan had saved the elves 300 years ago, but he asked her how she knew he was a descendant, and Salas said that elves never forget a debt of gratitude. In fact, all the children in the elf kingdom were told stories about the man who rescued them and had his portrait. Finally, they arrived at the elven village, and Salas' mother, Sheila, the queen of their village, thanked Aki for rescuing her daughter. Aki was surprised because he never even knew that Salas was an elven princess, and her mother said that she couldn't wait to repay Aki for what he had done, because she didn't want to incur another debt from the promise made 300 years ago. But another daughter of hers, named Nido, asked her mom to be sure that Aki was the guy they needed, because anyone else could be the descendant to fulfill the promise elves are made to. Sheila warned her daughter to show courtesy because they were meeting a guest for the first time in 300 years, and of course, the girl did so, but only after giving Aki side eyes that could cripple. The queen thanked Aki for saving her daughter's life, and she said that based on the covenant passed from some years ago, and from even more ancient times, she was going to reward him. She opened a portal of sorts, which led to a very high-level storage magic room. To Aki's utmost surprise, he was rewarded with literally every treasure in Bikini Bottom. Both Salas and her mother smiled as they asked him to accept their token of gratitude, but Aki said he couldn't possibly accept everything. Nido said he was dissatisfied and greedy, and she wondered what more he could possibly demand, but Salas cautioned her sister, saying she'd been nothing but rude the whole day. However, Nido pointed out that Rin, the spirit who'd attacked Salas, had been following Aki throughout, and there was a likelihood that they were in it together. Salas argued that the covenant was absolute, and more importantly, that Aki and his companion had successfully passed through the elven barrier, meaning that they had goodwill towards them. Aki asked them what the so-called covenant was all about, so the elven queen explained that it was something forged between the elven ancestor and the human ancestor, which was a pact heavier than life. Nido said she wasn't sure how it was for heartless humans, but it was a serious matter for the elves, a magic built upon the trust of the spirits. For elves who lived with their roots in the earth, to break their covenant with the spirits who governed the four elements would mean the death of their entire clan. Aki understood this to mean that when the promise was broken, the spirits who were the source of their power would abandon them. This eventually meant that Aki would be placing the elves in a difficult position if he did not accept it. But Aki said he hadn't really done anything himself, and saving Salas is something anyone would have done if they encountered someone in trouble. He then asked them what exactly had happened 300 years ago, and they showed him that the world tree, which was the surface source of spirits and the lives of the elves, had begun to wither. If it had been left as it was, the spirits of their land and all their lives would have perished along with the world tree. But the magic potion that the human ancestor brought saved the world tree, and by extension, saved them. The remnant of the magic potion was there, but had dwindled quite a bit, and if the elves ran out of it, the world tree might start to weaken again, and if that happened, the weaker individuals would start to die off, and eventually, all the elves. Aki reasoned that in Isekai stories, it was a given that the world tree held spirits, and by protecting the world tree, the elves also protected the spirits. He asked them whether the so-called magical potion was the same as the one he had in his hands, and they were all shocked, asking him how he had obtained that, but he said it was all a coincidence. When he was kicked out of his house, he just crammed in whatever he could carry, and since his skill was plant eater, he prioritized things that seemed related to plants, and that potion in his hand just happened to be fertilizer. It didn't exist 300 years back, but the concept of fertilizer is pretty common now, although the elves didn't know about this due to their lack of contact with humans for 300 years. Anyway, he gave Nido the fertilizer, and the queen hugged him tight, thanking him and saying the elves now owed him even more than they did before. She then asked him what sort of reward he wanted, because they were going to devote their lives to granting his every wish. Nido told the mum to be careful with Aki, because he was twisted enough and could ask them to shoot those buns up in the air for him. However, he surprisingly asked them if he could eat a leaf from the world tree, and everyone was shocked, most especially Rin, who passed out due to disappointment. The next day, a certain Lord Rivel, who was the Minister of Internal Affairs, paid a visit to the Guinness household, saying he couldn't entrust the territory to anyone else but Aki's father. He said that for the past 10 years, there had been no major conflicts with neighboring countries, so domestic affairs had become the battlefield for those who governed. Aki's father said that it was all thanks to Lord Rivel and his active role as the Minister of Internal Affairs, but the minister said that his position was not secure, and it was precisely in times of peace that internal conflicts arose. Aki's father asked him to explain what he meant by that, and the minister said there was no need to play dumb, as a rare treasure that could only be found in the Guinness territory was the elves. Now he had fully drawn the attention of the boys and their father, and then he said that once every few years, the elves would reveal themselves to mankind, bringing with them the knowledge of the elves. The common folk may think it was only a legend, but within the royal court, the existence of the elves was etched into historical records as the truth of history. He believed that Lord Guinness had been conducting his own investigation because some days before, an unknown barrier was discovered in their vicinity, and a certain Lady Hina found it, who was serving as the captain of the royal capital's night order. She was a stickler for the role, so it wasn't just information brought to the minister. But again, since anything obtained from the land belonged to Lord Guinness, and the relationship between the minister and Guinness was pretty good, he understood the vibes and the expectations on him. All that was needed was for him to restore friendly relationships with the elves, and he would be contributing to the country more than anyone else. The central government sought a connection with elves, and as a gateway to that, a connection with the Guinness territory. Obviously, lots of them would want to marry his excellent sons, and on that note, even the minister wanted his third daughter to get married into the Guinness household. The man asked about Aki and asked if he was married yet, but Aki's father was quiet. The minister said the marriage didn't have to happen right away, and told Guinness to keep everything he said in mind, because the wealth brought by the elves would be more than enough to make Lord Guinness an official in the central government, with change to spare. After the talk, Aki's brothers discussed how if they found the elves, they would definitely live lavishly as they wanted, and even if the eldest son in their family died, it would be fine as long as they connected with the elves, because no one cared about the useless piece of trash like Aki. The older brother said that they had to get to investigating the elves first, and they would go as far as burning down the forest if it came to that. Meanwhile, at the elf territory, Nido blabbered about how humans couldn't be trusted because he couldn't believe that Aki dared to ask for a leaf of their tree. The queen asked Aki why he was saying so, and he wanted to explain the whole plant-eater thing to them but realized it would be better to keep his mouth shut. However, Rin spoke up for him, saying it was because he wanted to get stronger, because his skill made him stronger whenever he ate plants, and she testified that when Aki ate her, the fresh fruits boosted his aura. The girls were shocked, wondering what she really meant, but she said it was her first time and he forced himself on her plant form. Aki explained that it wasn't what she meant and everything was a misunderstanding because he was only trying to rescue Salas. Anyway, much later, the queen understood that Aki had a skill that made him stronger by eating plants, and she said that it was all thanks to his skill that Salas was saved and the world tree at large. Even though Nido wanted to deny it, she couldn't, so the queen went on and said they would use the magic potion Aki gave them on the world tree. She began by introducing Aki to the villagers as their benefactor, but just then, a strange phenomenon occurred, and a dark aura clouded the entire forest of the elven territory. They went to check it out, wondering what had happened, but all they could tell was that a really terrible and nasty aura was coming from the direction of the forest and flowing all the way into the village. Even Rin could sense that something incredible had arrived in their direction, but Aki was surprised that she could sense it at all. She explained that the reason he couldn't tell was that she was a great spirit, but he was eager to find out how he could sense it in the way she did. Since he could use Rin's storage magic with his plant-eater skill, it could also mean that he could use all of her abilities. He decided to try by focusing his consciousness towards the forest, and instantly it worked. He could really see right through the forest spirits in the direction of the aura. Rin was busy hating, wondering how he could do that, while Salas was surprised that he could connect with the forest spirits even as a human. Aki explained that it was because he could use all of the abilities of the plants he ate, and since Rin was a great spirit, it was only expected that all her natural abilities were easily accessible to Aki. The leader was silent, realizing that she was only half convinced, but now that she had seen it in action, Aki's plant eater ability was a pretty incredible one. The queen herself observed this and was silent, but their attention turned back to Aki and they asked him what had happened in the forest. He said he was looking and seeing that something ridiculously strong seemed to have awoken in the forest. At that moment, all the forest beasts were running away from a certain thing, and a monstrous beast arose. He described it as a bear or demonic beast, which was humongous and extremely ferocious, and said that it had gone on a rampage through the forest. Before they knew what was happening, the monstrous beast clawed its way right through their barrier, and the barrier shattered. However, Aki told them that it wasn't the demonic bear that did it, but something even more dangerous. His foresight showed him a warrior who had just aimed at the beast, and he explained that it was an unintentional aftershock from a sword swung to defeat the demonic bear. Nido was surprised that an attack that was only aimed at the bear, and not to destroy the barrier, somehow managed to break through it, and that there was someone with that much power near their village. In any case, since they defeated the demonic beast, Nido felt that it was a good thing, but Aki told her that it didn't necessarily make whomever their ally. And from the looks of the person's gear, they were probably a knight, but the only reason a knight order would end in the forest was for the elves. But before Aki could complete saying that, the queen raised the potion and emptied its contents into the air around a magical circle. The girls asked their mother what she was doing. She said it was an emergency, and she was relying on the one with the highest probability of success. Instantly, the contents of the magical potion enveloped the world tree, and it soon became rejuvenated. Aki was stunned as well because he had been wondering why they were so excited about mere fertilizer, but seeing the effects of the fertilizer on their tree made him understand. Just then, a leaf from the world tree flew towards him. Thanks to the queen's magic, right in his hands, that leaf transformed into the famous medicinal herbs that housed sacred power and were highly sought after in their territory. The queen apologized for doing nothing but beg for Aki's mercy, and then she asked him to permit them to rely on his strength. As Aki held these plants, he could already feel incredible power emanating from every single one of them. He remembered that his stats went up just from eating a few weeds, and so he couldn't imagine what on earth would happen if he ate those herbs in his hands. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, the knight Hina had just defeated the demon bear in one slash of her sword. Her subordinates ran to check on her right after she had defeated it, sensing an immense presence coming from her direction. They were shocked to find that the denim bear was already down, as that had been their subjugation target and was known as a gristle. Everyone was in awe that Hina single-handedly defeated a monster like that all by herself in one single blow. Anyway, she told the old man named Marwell that she was leaving the rest of the work to him, as she had an important assignment to accomplish. The guy called out to her, but she paid him no attention and continued in her intended direction. Hina felt terrible saying she overdid it because she knew it was going to happen. Obviously, she had a feeling that there was a barrier in the forest, and if her instincts were right, that barrier belonged to the elves, so she had to run and inform them that she wasn't a threat. While she approached, Aki sensed that something insane was running towards their village, and Rin confirmed that whatever it was headed in their direction at full speed. The girls asked Aki if it was the more insane beast that defeated the insane monster, and he confirmed that it was, although he couldn't tell what its objective was. Nido wondered why Aki was trying so hard to be a Riz lord when their village was about to be destroyed, so she grabbed the herbs and shoved them in his mouth. The moment Aki had completely consumed the herbs, a weird phenomenon occurred around him, and the aura was magnified in multiples. He had acquired the spirit's divine protection of fire and of water and wind and of earth. He also acquired the power and the other skills as secondary effects of the spirit's blessings involving the awakening of the earth, protection of the trees, boon of water, feathers of the wind and guardian of the flame. And finally, he acquired wisdom through the plant eater, which all significantly increased his status. Salas was shocked as she noticed that Aki's magic reserves were shooting up, but Rin was so excited and squealed for joy. At the same time, Aki was informed by the status window that he could now form a contract with the Great Spirit in Rin. Instantly, Rin pushed herself forward, saying it all looks like fun, and she eagerly established the contract with him by placing her forehead directly against his. That gave Aki a new skill known as the Spirit Cloak. He noticed something weird emanating from Rin's body and literally saw her melting. But what happened was that her physical body shrank while her spirit aura enveloped Aki's body. Just then, Rin pushed Aki in a certain direction and a little explosion occurred, creating a crater in the earth. She directed him with her hands, but Aki pulled her off his head, telling her not to go about controlling his body all by herself. As he did that, he realized he was the one in control and could still feel incredible power welling up within him. Also, he agreed that a great spirit was still a great spirit, even one as rotten as Rin. Anyway, with the whole spirit aura around him, he was confident that he could put up a decent fight. And then he anticipated the arrival of the knight he had seen. On the other hand, Hina, who was approaching at a very high speed, realized she had built too much momentum and couldn't stop herself. But she coincidentally ran into Aki, and as both their energies collided, there was a huge explosion in the forest. This was all due to her great speed, which had created a deep crater in the ground. Following the unintentional collision, Hina explained, saying she was sorry, and after listening to her, Aki explained that the bottom line was that Hina was a big shot in the royal capital's Night Order who came into the forest on a mission, and after taking down the target, got carried away and accidentally destroyed the elf's barrier in the process. Nido was pissed, asking just how carried away she was because the trees were scorched and knocked flat from just Hina running in their direction, and they were only lucky that Aki stopped her and prevented major damage. Aki asked them what they meant by no major damage, seeing that she left a giant crater in the village, but the good thing was that no one got hurt, and that was because Aki saved Nido just when she was about to get caught up in the aftershock. Salas said that it was a good thing Aki came to their village, but Nido, proud as ever, remained silent. Anyway, Salas told her sister that they would go and thank him together much later. Meanwhile, Hina kept saying she was deeply sorry and knew she had always tended to get a little tunnel vision. However, she admitted her surprise after realizing that the eldest son of the Guinness family possessed such power. It felt strange, but she doubted that there were more than a few people in the entire capital who could have stopped her in that high-speed state of hers, and it was still a miracle that no elves or people were harmed. For that reason, it truly was a good thing that Aki was there in the elf village. Aki realized that even though Hina was pretty dangerous, she wasn't a bad person, and so he said that gaining an ally with influence in the central government wasn't a bad thing for him. Nido asked why the central government needed more allies when their human king resided there, but Paki told her that in the end, it was better to have more strong allies. Seeing that the elves put up a barrier, they certainly knew that there were all sorts of wicked people carrying various ideologies out there. Even though their world tree had recovered and their power had grown, it was also a fact that humans with immense power, such as Hina and Aki, existed. For example, Nido said that Aki was such a dangerous character who ate spirits. Anyway, the king chipped in, saying there was a covenant with Aki's ancestor, and perhaps it was time for them to enter an age of joining hands with humanity, because, like Aki, there were humans who, even after gaining power, didn't misuse it. Nido even said that she could consider the idea if such people were spineless, beta males like Aki. Hina excitedly said that this was exactly what the royal capital was hoping for. She had entered the forest under the pretext of subjugating the demon bear, but her true mission was to investigate the forest. In any era, a connection with the elves has always been a dream for humanity. Anyway, just then, Rin brought a flower crown that a child in the village had given to her as a tribute to Aki, after she had gone about getting to know people in the village. But just then, Hina ran towards Rin almost as though she was attacking her, only to blush hard at Rin's cuteness. She felt that Rin was so overwhelmingly adorable and wondered if she was a fairy, particularly a flower fairy. She went on to convince herself that Rin's green hair and big mystical eyes were only expected features of a fairy. But Rin argued that she was no fairy but rather a spirit, and not just any spirit, but a great spirit. Afterwards, they had a minor bump, and Hina described it to be electrifying and precious. She fell into worship mode, worshipping the Great Spirit because spirits were symbols of life and mystery that coexisted with the elves and were also the source of all energy. Already, Hina was long lost in Delulu world and was creeping Rin out, but Hina went back to serious mode, saying they should discuss their next steps. Aki told her, though, that she had already lost 1,000,000 aura points and was a little too late to stop trying to play it cool. She fainted on the spot, wailing for her lost aura, but Aki thought of her as a handful. She explained that ever since she was young, her ability to think like a normal person malfunctioned whenever she encountered anything cute. And on top of it, it was a spirit which she had always admired and daydreamed about. Nido looked at her and realized that Hina had a lot of triggers for getting tunnel vision, but the queen said that it was better to have a knight who was a little gentle, unlike some others. Hina said that, considering the humans' objective, they could have used her military might to forcibly subjugate the elves, and that was indeed one of the proposed approaches, but Hina was different and was a true knight who devoted her loyalty to her lord. She felt she should be a sword and shield for the powerless, and if there was anyone who would commit such atrocities, she would never stand for it. Besides, they now had a key on their side, and the difficult people in government wouldn't be able to make any rash moves against the Guinness family, because they were the only ones in the kingdom who had deep ties to the elves. However, Aki realized that she had been getting it all wrong because he hadn't told her he had already been kicked out of the Guinness family and was essentially a commoner. Now, hearing this, Hina was visibly shocked and speechless. Upon hearing this, Rin burst into hysterical laughter at the fact that Aki got kicked out of his house, but he pulled her hair to keep her in order. Nido, on the other hand, said that he really was a suspicious person because he had no fixed address and was unemployed. Aki explained that that was exactly why he was camping out in a forest full of monsters and promptly got attacked by Rin. And even though he was a noble, such a terrible disaster befell him. In the end, Aki said, though, that it all worked out for him because, thanks to that, he was able to save Salas. Salas said that it was truly all thanks to Aki, but Rin said, trying to cover up her tracks, that if Aki hadn't been kicked out of his house, then he wouldn't have eaten her. And if he hadn't eaten Rin, she would have digested Salas and they would both have died. So in summary, it was a good thing that Aki got kicked out. Aki apologized to Hina, saying that because of what had befallen him, she would now not expect anything from the House of Guinness. But Hina said that, strictly speaking, it wasn't the House of Guinness, but the influence of the factions backing them that was important. Factions, starting with the Minister of Internal Affairs, the Lord Givell, used their ties to the House of Guinness to try and increase their own influence by connecting with the elves. In opposition to them were factions who took a hardline stance on interacting with demi-humans such as elves and dwarves, and schemed to gain effective control over them. Aki realized that this was pretty bad, but Hina said it wasn't all bad, and she came to understand a fair bit about his own character. Aki, on his own, had been accepted by the elves, and more importantly, possessed enough power to form a covenant with a great spirit. If they simply thought of it as the rule of liaison between the kingdom and the elves, having shifted from the House of Guinness to Aki, then all that needed to be done was a simple thing. Nido asked her to clarify what she meant, and Hina explained that the political maneuvering within the kingdom could be broadly divided into two halves. The first half was composed of the extremists who wanted to control the demi-humans, and the second half was composed of the moderates who wanted to form a cooperative relationship. The truth was that the extremists were the easier ones to deal with. Salas asked if this meant they would have to fight them, and it meant even that the battle would be more intense, given that there were so many of them in the royal capital. But Hina said she was the commander of the Night Order because she was the most powerful in the kingdom, and if they intended to pick a fight with Aki, who was her equal or her superior, then all they had to do was crush them together. In any case, getting Hina's seal of approval meant their fighting strength was superior, but the problem they would encounter would be how to handle the moderates, and saying that Hina would be the bridge wasn't going to cut it. Even though these dudes were called the moderates and sounded so cute and nice, in reality, they were a ridiculous lot aiming to secure that right for themselves. They wanted to connect with the elves and would most likely try to cozy up to them from that onwards, but the question Nido asked was why they wanted to get involved with the elves so badly. Hina explained that for mortal humans, the existence of elves was a fantasy and an object of longing, and if they connected with the elves, they could obtain immense wealth and unknown technologies, get beautiful men and women, and have all their fantasies fulfilled. From there, Hina continued to explain that it had to become a battle of wits, because influential figures, royalty, and nobles would approach Aki with a hidden motive, so he had to learn to discern which one among them could be trusted. Nido asked if Aki, who was an empty brain, could do something like that, but he told her he wasn't that naive. She asked him what would happen if he found someone in trouble on the road, and he instantly said he would go on to help them. They asked him if he was listening at all and said that Aki, being a softie, was extremely hopeless, and if they left him all by himself, people would take advantage of him. Rin also confirmed this and said that Aki seemed to be a glorified idiot for all it was worth. The queen joined the conversation, calling Aki and Hina and explaining that the fact that both of them possessed such a rare power was a great blessing for the elves. But what was even more fortunate is that both of them were good people, and so she told her daughters that they should rejoice that the number of humans they would welcome had increased. Hina bowed before her as she spoke and said that for those who lived alongside the noble spirits and who were bound to mystery, she would take responsibility for endangering the elven people, and she swore on her own honor as a knight. Afterwards, she said that she would return to the royal capital ahead of the elf queen and begin countermeasures. Just then, all Hina, Aki, and Rin sensed a hostile energy approaching the barrier. However, Rin said that whatever was approaching was weaker than before. And just then, one of the guards, elf guards, announced that humans were headed towards their village. Instantly, Aki saw that those involved included one of his younger brothers and an entire army. And he told Salas that it was just a little brother's quarrel that he could end quickly. Meanwhile, Aki's younger brother shared that he had believed the whole elf thing was ridiculous, but judging by the minister's attitude, he could tell that they really were in the forest. One of the subordinates asked Aki's brother, Jill, whether they should have just waited for the master's instruction, but Jill told him to shut up because he was the next head of the family, and he should just do what he said as he instructed and find the elves. Jill knew that the elves were right there in the forest in front of them, so he wondered why his father was being so cautious, and decided that he'd hurry and claim the credit for himself. Among the subordinates, some whispered whether elves were real, and others said that the search for the elves had been happening in secret. But the master said that how they made contact with the elves was what was important. So no one really understood what on earth his stupid son, Jill, was thinking so suddenly. Everyone could tell that the fact that he brought them all to that elf territory meant he planned to subdue the elves by force. They all wondered whether they could win in the first place because, according to the legends, elves possessed incredible magical powers. But now that they had come so far, there was no stopping this blockhead called Jill. Reporting were some guards who confirmed that there were individuals who appeared to be elves. Jill was excited seeing the credit all belonged to him, as even the high officials in the royal capital wanted a connection to the elves. And since his elder brother, a small fry, was gone, all Jill had to do was get the elves under his thumb, and the house would belong to him. He asked his subordinates more questions, saying he heard the elves were all peerless beauties, and he wanted to know if the rumors were true. But the subordinates said to avoid being spotted, they only confirmed the presence of elves from a distance and couldn't make out their appearance. However, Jill snapped at them, saying they were all useless, and said that since he was the one who found them, no one would complain if he tasted some of those elven rice cakes and turned 2 or 3 of the ones he liked into his personal pets. But Aki answered from behind that that was definitely not okay, and told his younger brother that he had no intention of changing. The soldiers were shocked to see Aki, the eldest son of the Guinness household, but they had all heard that he had passed away in an accident in the forest. Jill asked his older brother why on earth he was there, and Rin asked Aki who the noisy idiot was. Rin then said that the guy looked way weaker than Aki, but Jill couldn't believe her audacity to say she was weaker than Aki, who was just a small, weak fellow. He reminded Aki that he was just a useless bum who got kicked out of his own house, and asked if Aki was arrogant enough to try and find the elves for himself. But just then, he noticed that 2 elves were standing in front of him. Aki told the girls to stay hidden behind Hina, but Salas said she couldn't leave the village's crisis to someone else and was willing to help him. The 2 elves stood in front of Aki, and Aki told the girls to stay hidden behind Hina. Jill, seeing this, burst out laughing, saying that Aki was just a slow, incompetent, useless waste of space who was born first, and some piece of trash exiled from the family. Jill acknowledged that Aki may have been lucky to find the elves first, but he would certainly not be able to come back and claim them. To Jill, the elves and the house belonged to him, and Aki should spend the rest of his miserable life groveling on the ground. Aki warned his brother that his approach wasn't going to work, and that if he wanted to borrow the elves' power, he would have to respect them. But Jill warned Aki not to give him any dumb lecture, because his last working brain cell could explode. Besides, Aki was just being annoying as always and forgetting his place. But now was a perfect opportunity for Jill to show his power, and perhaps making an example of Aki would gain him an advantage in his negotiation with the elves. Since Aki was supposed to be dead anyway, he instructed the soldiers to go ahead and execute him on the spot. The soldiers said there was no way they could do that. They could attack the rightful master of the house, and one of them decided to report to their father. But Jill ended him on the spot and said that if the rest of the soldiers didn't know their place, they would follow suit. As such, they had no option but to shut up and obey him. Instantly, they were terrified and ran towards Aki while the girls worried for his safety. Just then, Hina stepped forward, saying that at that level, there was no need to worry about Aki or worry about herself either, and if there was anything to be worried about, it would be whether or not she could hold back properly. At that moment, she dealt with them one after the other, and Aki begged her not to injure them too badly. Thereafter, Salas bestowed her healing magic on some of the wounded soldiers, saying that even though her power was small, she could be of service whenever it came to healing. Nido was surprised and asked her sister why she was helping an inhuman, but Salas said that she couldn't forget that she was also saved by a human. As this all unfolded, Jill was shocked beyond words, and both Hina and Aki said they only had to hold back a reasonable amount now that it was time for them to face that idiot. At that moment, Jill's head was full of questions, as she couldn't understand what on earth had just happened, and how Aki and Hina single-handedly had defeated his entire army. Much later, he ended up being tied before the elves but went on yapping, asking if they were prepared to face the consequences, because Aki was the one who got exiled, and the current heir to the house of Guinness was Jill. He asked Aki if a worthless nobody like him could get away with doing such a thing to him, but all they wanted was for him to stop yapping at that moment. Nido asked Jill how he could act so high and mighty in such a situation, and wondered whether the guy was truly Aki's brother, but Aki said that they had different mothers. Rin, on the other hand, wondered why Jill called Aki a nobody even though he couldn't lay a finger on him, and she recounted how the fight went down. Apparently, Aki had dealt with Jill a ton and was trying to force the guy to give up so he would not get beaten more, but the idiot couldn't stop himself and told Aki not to mess with him or get cocky over one lucky shot. Rin urged Aki then to rough his stupid brother up a little more, but Aki knew that there was a huge power gap between himself and his brother, and he really didn't feel like hurting the idiot. Back when he lived at home, he couldn't even beat Jill in swordsmanship, and Jill always beat him to a pulp. But now, even without using Rin's spirit cloak, Jill's movement looked so slow before Aki. It was because Aki had eaten a ton of things besides the leaves of the world tree, but the plants in that elven village were something else, and he wondered what would happen if he kept eating like that. The girls asked Aki what to do next with his stupid brother because the guy didn't seem sorry at all, and they could just go ahead and feed him to the monsters. But Aki knew that he couldn't send his brother home just like that, and so he had to try threatening him a bit. He told Jill that even though the elven village was a small one, it was effectively the land of the elves, and if he was caught after suddenly invading it, it wouldn't only be his safety, but the survival of his entire household that would be at risk. Jill bragged that Aki could not do anything like that because Jill was the next lord and the man who would become a great noble. If Aki pulled a stupid stunt on him, obviously, the Royal Capital Knight Order wouldn't just stand by and watch. Jill admitted that he was careless before, which was why Aki could strike first, but such an incompetent weakling and a bunch of fuzzled shut-ins could not beat the elites of the Knight Order because they could set the forest on fire if that's what they wanted. Nido was surprised to hear these atrocious utterances, and asked Aki if humans could really wage war in such an insane way. But Aki told her that the kingdom would not get involved over something as stupid as that. Jill said nobody like Aki wouldn't understand, but in the first place in that situation could be framed as the heir of a neighboring lord being unjustly captured. The truth of such a situation could be rewritten depending on who was telling the story, just like the story of how Aki being exiled changed to him dropping dead in the forest. Obviously, depending on who told the story, Lord Jill was the next head of the House of Guinness, was the law, and no one would believe a failure like Aki and his dumb bunch of elves. Hina stepped forward, thinking in that case they had got him, because Lord Gina's judgment had truly grown clouded to think he could exile Aki and name stupid Jill as his heir. Jill asked who she was, and she asked him if he knew who she was. With her sword pointed at him, she told him to remain silent and not disgrace the human race any further. Jill stupidly said he was the son of a great noble who protected the frontier of a great nation, and so there was no one there who was more important than him. But Hina told him he must be mistaken, because right then he was no noble. The value of a human who was not yet confirmed as the next lord was not as high as this idiot thought, because it was a position from which one could easily be exiled. Jill told Hina not to lump him together with his weakling brother, because he was born different from trash like her, and it was her duty to shut up and obey him. But she asked him whose words the king would believe. Hers, the commander of the royal capital's first night order, or Jill's, who was just a piece of nothing. It was then that it occurred to this idiot, and then Hina told him that he had been barking while not recognizing her face. According to Hina, he had committed a heinous act of aggression against their allies, the elves, and this had become such a matter that she must report both as a member of the knights and a citizen of the kingdom. Jill started sweating and wishing he could undo what he had done, but Hina bowed before Sheila, the queen, apologizing as a citizen of the royal capital and saying she would take full responsibility for reporting Jill. She then said she would like to arrange a formal meeting at a later date. After Hina's speech, Rin mocked her, saying the girl was busy acting cool, but it was all her fault because she broke the barrier in the first place. Everyone told Hina how repairing the barrier was a difficult job, and it was such a pain to stand and guard against the monsters so they wouldn't get into the village. But the queen told Hina not to mind them because she protected anyone without getting hurt, and she was grateful for her sincerity. Hina was emotional, busting into tears, but Aki said that they had to talk things over with both his family and the kingdom. The elves said a conference with the kingdom was necessary for them as well, but they still had to fix the barrier as soon as possible because Aki's father was looking for the elven village as well. In that case, the queen said she could substitute her own mana for a while since the world tree had regained strength, and as the elder of the village, her mana was connected to the world tree. Aki realized that he could definitely feel the power of the world tree emanating from the queen, and wondered whether it was because he had eaten the leaf of the world tree that he now also seemed connected to it. However, Naito told him to stop staring at her mum because her mum, being a prototype for sugar mummies, did not give Aki the right to be a cultured beast. The queen smiled, laughing at her daughter, but Naito tried to explain to her mum that it wasn't that she was jealous or anything. Sheila said she couldn't leave the village, as she had to maintain the barrier. Therefore, for the conference with the kingdom, she would be sending her daughters, Salas and Naito, as representatives. Naito said they could simply have sent an envoy there from their kingdom, but the queen said that she would restore the barrier shortly, although anyone who could bring them the slightest harm would be forced to wander in the forest forever. A single envoy might make it through, but a large group could definitely not reach them. Hina was excited because they had such a powerful barrier, but Aki said that the forest was complicated and he might be unable to find his way even without a barrier. However, the queen drew him into her embrace, saying the world tree would guide him because he was already like kin to the elves. Naito was pissed, asking Aki what he was doing to her mother, but Aki tried to explain that he was the poor one who got forced into her garden. Anyway, Salas asked their mom whether it was really okay for Naito to go to the human kingdom because the girl had said she would never leave the village. But Naito said it couldn't be helped, and now that things had come to that level, she just had to go. In any case, it was finalized that Aki, Salas, Naito, and Hina were going. But Hina said she would be going separately because she had to escort those rascals to the royal capital first. She said her squad was waiting nearby, so she would wait to meet them first. Anyway, Aki worried whether her squad would be able to get to the elven forest because he thought the path to the village was made impossible to find. But she said Marwell was always sniffing around nearby for her presence, and coincidentally, the old man appeared, saying he had been searching for her. Salas asked him how he got there, but Hina told her not to bother herself because Marwell was just that kind of guy. Also, they saw the dead monster that Hina had defeated and were shocked because it was time for this demon bear known as the Scourge of the Forest to awaken. But a human being defeated it in a single blow, and she destroyed the barrier with the aftershock. Hina said as an apology, she would have offered the beast to the elves who made their living by hunting it, but she must submit the crystal to the kingdom as proof that she had subjugated it. And so, instead, she gave them the monsters she had defeated along the way and told them to make use of them in the village. While she smiled warmly, everyone realized that really Hina was a menace. With all that has transpired, will the humans decide to go to war against the elves? And will Hina and Iki be powerful enough to stop that from happening? If you'd like to find out in part 2, type elf juice in the comment section. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed the watch and subscribe to the channel for similar content. As always, thanks for watching.